Welcome to RStudio and R Part 2, Reshaping Data. This is Dr. N. Mao, Professor of Information Systems, and today we're going to go over a couple of really interesting things on how we can restructure data. In R, there are a couple of functions that's very useful when you want to restructure your data to make them into different shapes, meaning collapsing columns in getter function, or you can do the exact opposite using the spread function to move data from large columns, very vertical top columns, into separate ones. Let's go over getter first. We have 8 different activities planned for this function. So let's get started. First, we need to install the packages that we need. Specifically, we're going to need tidyr, and also in order subset for one of the activities, we're going to also make sure tidyverse is loaded. Previously, we have already installed tidyr, dplyr, and tidyverse. So if you have done that, the only thing we need to do is to load those libraries. And we're going to load particularly tidyr and tidyverse. So let's do that. You can continue to use the same R file you have started from last time, and you can continue with piling up the history. That's no problem. I will tell you what to do with that, how to submit later, so no worry there. So let's go ahead and load up the packages we need. Okay, we have library, tidyr, and tidyverse. And now we're ready to go. And we're going to be using in this exercise a built-in dataset in R called US arrests. And this is the code we'll be writing to put that dataset into a new data frame called my data. Let's put my data, and it's coming from US arrests. And watch what happens as you type. The name actually will pop up, so you can just tap to pick it up. And let's take a look at the data. If you scroll up, and you'll be able to see 5 different columns in here. So the first column is actually the index column. Just like if you have an ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, here happens to be using the state names. And then you have 4 other data columns, and these are, if you look at different assault or crimes. So we have murder, assault, urban pop, and rape. And the statistics, those are the estimates of those assaults listed here. If you notice, we do have the state information, but we don't really have that as a column named as state. So instead of just having this indexed, we're going to add a column called state. To do that, we will use a cbind function. This has been covered extensively in the DataCamp training. Essentially, you use the keyword cbind, and you just put whatever you want to combine. Here we have a couple of elements we have here. We want to insert a column called state, and the state is actually coming from the row names, which is in that index we saw earlier of my data, and combine that with the existing my data. So let's take a look. So we want to go ahead for my data, and it's going to be cbind. Remember, we have inside, we're going to combine both the state, which is the name that we're given to our column, and that's coming from the row names of my data. We want to combine that, separating by comma, with my data. Okay, so let's go ahead Let's make sure I have the S in here. Row names, run it again. One of the things I want to kind of help you to realize is that in your history, if you want to keep it clean, we might want to go back and delete the errors we had, okay? So I'm going to actually delete the one I had an S missing and go up to this column, this icons here, the one with delete. It's going to remove the selected history entry. So I'm going to remove that one and say yes to it to keep it clean. So the data set has a lot of rows right now. We're going to make it a little bit smaller so it's easier for us to actually work with. So we're going to learn how we can actually select just 4 states. We'll be using the subset function we have covered previously, and this essentially defines we'll be using my data as our data frame, and it's going to have the conditions using or separating by the vertical lines. So we want all the states matching Alabama or Georgia or Maryland or New Jersey, which will produce 4 rows. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're typing my data, and it's gonna be the subset of my data, and it will be restricted to the states double equal sign to Alabama. Make sure you're typing exactly the same spelling, okay? And also the state equals to, double equals to Georgia, and we're gonna have the vertical sign, state double equals to, we have Maryland, and vertical line, state equals to, the last one is New Jersey. Okay, so let's take a look. Now we have reduced all those states down to those 4 specific ones, so making it a little bit easier to manipulate. Now we're ready to look at the getter function, which has 3 compartments. We define the data frame and the key column and the value column. So those 2 are basically defining names for the resulting data. Okay, so let's look at with this example. So we're going to gather my data, and we're going to gather all those different crimes, the assaults, we call them arrest attributes. So it's name given, and the cells data will be going to the column called arrest estimate. So you can see I'm corresponding, this is the column name that will be arrest attributes, and this will be next to it will be the arrest estimate. One of the things we will do is we don't really need to combine the state, so we'll actually use the minus state to make it the correct result. So let's take a look. So we'll start with getter, and we're going to gather from my data, and we're going to use the shift enter to make it a little bit clear. So we're going to define where everything is coming from. So we're going to have value. I'm going to start with the key. The name of the key is arrest underscore attributes, and make sure you have the comma and shift enter or return again, and this is going to be the value. I'm going to define the value. This will be arrest estimate, and remember, shift return again. We're going to delete minus state, which means we are not combining state. So let's just think for a second what the result will look like. So essentially what will happen is you're going to stagger all the states together, and the murder, assault, urban, and rape will become the row data for the next column called arrest attribute. So 4 different arrest attributes. It will be stacked on top of each other: murder, assault, urban pop, and rape. And then the estimates will be listed in the next column called arrest estimate. Okay, so based on this, we have 4 different arrest attributes and 4 different states. 4 times 4, the resulting vertical table will contain 16 rows. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And as we talked about earlier, you will have the arrest attribute with all this stacked on top of each other and the arrest estimates on top of each other. So let's put this resulting table into a new data frame called my data 2. So I'm actually going to pick up the previous line of code and then just go to the beginning of the line and enter my data 2 and the source. Okay, and we'll enter that. So my data 2 is now populated. If we go back to the environment, you can see my data 2, which has 16 observations and 3 variables. Let's have some fun with 2 more examples. In this particular one, we are actually just gathering 2 different crimes, murder and assault. Okay, so let's try doing that. So I can actually bring up my previous run. Don't overwrite my data 2. We're going to keep that. And the only thing I would do is come to the end, and I just want murder and assault. Okay, those 2. So let's go ahead and run that. And you can see the difference here is you only have gathered 2 different kinds of crime, murder and assault. Okay, so 2 crimes times 4 states is 8 rows. So you can see 8 records here. Let's try one more. The last example on gather is we're going to gather a range of columns. So we're going to take the range from murder to urban pop. So let's go back to our data here. So let's bring out our original data so we can see we want everything between murder and urban pop. So 3 columns with 4 different states are going to result with 12 rows of data. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring up, come back to my console, and I'm going to bring back the previous one and just modify that and put column, which indicate a range to urban pop. Okay, so urban pop is the ending column. So let's go ahead and run that. We have 12 rows with murder, assault, and urban pop. So you can see in gather function, we are almost like denormalizing data into a flat file. Next, we're going to go over the reverse, which is spread. We're going to actually take this very tall vertical table, flat file, and spread it, means separate them into appropriate columns back to the original data, just like here in my data. Okay, so just kind of remind you, we have my data, which is the one with my data 2, which is storing the 16 rows of data. And we're going to actually reverse that into my data using the spread function. Okay, so let's take a look at what constitutes the spread. So in spread, is basically reversing what we did earlier in getter. It's the same exact compartments with the function. So we have data frame, the key column, and the value column. So if you look at an example, it's almost identical, except instead of saying getter, we say spread. So we're going to put in this my data 3, which would be the resulting spread it table. So again, we're using that flat file, my data 2, and the key is the same, the arrest attributes, and the value is arrest estimate. So it just makes it a bit easier. I will just go ahead and start with spread, and it's going to be my data 2, and we're going to do a comma, shift value, and we're going to go, the key is arrest. So pay attention, make sure you type it that correctly, and comma, I'm going to do shift return again, and value will be arrest underscore estimate. Okay, so that completes this particular function. Okay, so let's run that. It's like magic. We took that data 2, my data 2, if you remember, we had murder, assault, urban pop, and rape stacked on top of each other, right? And now we split them up into their individual columns. So that is the resulting kind of normalized table. I mentioned earlier that we will go back and look at the history. So let's take a look at our history with all the functions in there. I had a clean start, so if you want, go back to find wherever you started with the library and go all the way back down to when we did the spread. So at this point, we're actually going to look at the script. The first time when we started explaining where different panes are, so this top left pane is actually the source area. So let's go to your Untitled 1, which is blank. So this is just like a text file, but this is where you can actually store your code, our programming code, and be able to run all of them at once. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is to select from where we can find from library tidyr, tidyverse. That's where we started our part 2 exercise. And you're just going to scroll down and hold on your shift key to select the last line of code. So now you have selected everything. Right next to the history save button we did last time, you will see you have 2 options. You can send it to source, which is where the source and script area, or you can send it to console right here. What we're going to do is actually send it to the source. So click on that. You can see all the code we just did are here. So what's the big deal of this? The big deal is that you can save this and you can come back, open it up, and run it in your console. Now you're going to select all by doing Command A or Control A on Windows. On Mac is Command A. And then you're going to go use that run. Okay, so you're going to run, which will actually happen here. It's going to go really quick, so pay attention. So have your finger on the run and look at what's going to happen to your console. You actually run everything we just did instantaneously. Okay, took no time. We're going to end up with, you can see again, viewed my data 2 at the end. Isn't that amazing? So now let's save this. And this is what you're going to be turning in along with your project. So let's go ahead, come back to my title 1. and I want you to add a few comments. So I'm gonna go here. You're gonna put the hashtag, and this is gonna be our project, RStudio, and our part 2, and this is gonna be reshaping data, and put a hashtag, your name. It's always a good idea to add those lines or comments to make it easier to go back and understand your code. So feel free to go add the few lines as long as I had in the outline before you're turning in. Okay, so go ahead and save that, and we're going to put it into the same folder, and I will call this RStudio R2 and script. And you can take a look in your folder that RStudio R2 script .r is included. Okay, so there it is. That concludes the second RStudio exercise, and thank you for learning with me again, and I hope you had a lot of fun like I did. Thank you for watching.